friends. This is the BarDahnPod podcast. We took a week off, but alas, we are back. Brody and Pat here. We got a lot to talk about this week for episode 9.
Big story going on right now is a NHL franchise might be coming to Seattle. There's been some talks about Seattle, Houston, and Quebec City. I think Seattle and Houston have been the two main front runners that make the most sense since there's an imbalance between the conferences. Seattle, it makes sense, I guess, for the NHL to go to Seattle, given that the arena's already there and they're just making the renovations and improvements to it. So they won't have to wait too long, for an arena to be built and everything like that. I don't know. What were your thoughts on Seattle over Houston?
I think Seattle's probably the smart move. Like you said, the arena's already there. It's where the Supersonics used to play, I believe.
Yep.
Obviously with the odd number of teams in the league now that Vegas is in there, then obviously another team was going to happen sooner rather than later. But I think with this, they're shooting for it to be done by like 2020. So that's only another 2 seasons or so. And geographically, I think it makes more sense too, because there's already a WHL team there, I believe. In Seattle, they don't play at that particular place, obviously, but that putting a team there also just geographically should create a natural rivalry between Seattle and Vancouver, since they're in such close proximity to each other. Houston is a good market too, but there's no arena there, so I think that would take longer. If anything, I could see a team, maybe moving there as opposed to bringing in a brand new team like Carolina. They're going to do with Seattle. Well, Carolina their owner just sold the majority share to a businessman from Houston. So, and he specifically said that he's going to keep the team in Raleigh. So if anything, it would more than likely be, one of the other teams that's struggling in their area, like Arizona, or, I don't know how many Florida games you watch, but more often than not, a good portion of the seats, in the Panthers arena are empty. And obviously they can't keep that up, especially with another thing that just happened in these recent meetings between the owners and the GMs and stuff like that, is the salary cap is going to go up again next year. It looks like it'll be anywhere between I think 78 and 82 million. So right now it's at 75. So anywhere between $3 to $5 million increase, which is good for the big market teams like Chicago and New York and things like that, because they'll continue to spend to the cap. But that causes problems as it gets higher. That only causes more problems for those lower tier teams that are barely even getting to the cap floor with the way that it is now. So that could cause some shakeups here too. Maybe not necessarily next year, or with the new cap coming, but if it continues to increase, then that's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, with Carolina, I know he said it, but when it comes down to business, he may take the Houston route. It makes sense to keep them there, I guess, for now. Maybe, but he may just be saying that for like publicity, saying the right things, being not necessarily politically correct, but just keeping the fans reassured. But we've seen it happen with football. Teams pretty much leaving for no reason. Like they had a good fan base in Oakland, and they're moving to Vegas, and the Rams already left. So I wouldn't be surprised if Carolina ends up moving to Houston. What I would really like to see is just have another team. And then, once we finally get the imbalance leveled out between the two conferences, if they're going to expand more, I would like to see them bring in 2 teams at a time. That way, like, one conference doesn't have an advantage over the other. But I don't know if we're ever going to get to that point where they bring in multiple teams in one season ever again, because all the major markets are already taken up. There's a couple, like, NBA markets that they haven't tapped into, but they're pretty much untouchable when it comes to hockey, because you're not gonna, I'm not familiar with the areas, but I couldn't see a team being in Portland or in Utah playing hockey.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any sort of fan base there or not. I mean, obviously, they don't have a team currently. They never did have a team. That's the one kind of interesting thing, I guess, about Quebec City is, they've already had a team there, and they were forced to relocate. So, do you want to take that chance in putting another team there? I'm sure there's enough. There's at least a certain amount of people, in that city that are very eager and would love to have another team, in their city. But is it enough to, sustain a team, in the long run? Because some teams, just don't pan out. Atlanta is probably the most recent one that.
Yeah, that didn't last long at all.
Yeah, and they're another example that at one point they did have a team there too, and it didn't work out the first time, and then it was very short-lived the second time, and now they're in Winnipeg, and it's great up there. They had a team before too, but it took them a couple years to kind of do their rebuild up there. But that Jets team this year, at least, is no joke. So that's a big thing too, is if you can put a winning team on the ice, then that's only going to help you in the long run, and Vegas is a great example of that, because even though they're a brand new expansion team, with the way that they've been rolling, that's only going to put asses in the seats. So
yeah, and they got their number one goaltender back in Fleury. Finally, I think he missed 26 games, something like that. He played last night. They got a point. They lost in a shootout, but at least that's something promising in his first game back, that they're still getting a point on the board.
Yeah, I mean, he only played 4 games, I think it was, before he went down. So, they were one of the teams that was bitten by the injury bug, right off the bat, similar to Anaheim. Anaheim obviously has a lot more players, injured and that have been out. Vegas hasn't really had to deal with that too much, but 30 some games into the season now, we're kind of starting to see more and more significant injuries come up for teams. So just as of late, Chicago lost Corey Crawford for a significant period of time. I'm not exactly sure how long he's out, but I know that it's more than just a day-to-day thing. And then another big injury that just happened would be Jayden Schwartz from the Blues. He's got an ankle injury, and he's going to miss probably at least 6 weeks, I think, and then they'll reevaluate him then. So there's no real guarantee even that he'll return at that point, which, at the beginning of the year, whenever we looked at them, I didn't really think that they were, going to be the force that they are. But, they're, right at the top in the West, and, they don't show any signs of slowing down. But, he's, I think, second on the team in scoring, so that doesn't help them. And then Alex Pietrangelo, he just went down with an injury too, but I don't think that's as significant as the Schwartz injury.
Yeah, that's going to be a pretty big hit for them. Obviously, like you said, they're rolling right now, and top spot in the West, and there has been quite a few injuries lately. I mean, we were just talking about the Dubinsky injury from a fight last night. Corey Perry's, the Ducks get Getzlaf back, and now they're losing Perry for what seems to be week to week for right now with the leg injury. So, I mean, I guess it's just like kind of your mid-season woes, I guess, that you have to get through. Every team's going through it. But like with the Knights, it did hit them early, but how do I want to word this? I guess you can win with mediocre goaltending, but you can't win with mediocre scoring, in my opinion anyway, and mediocre defense for that matter. Like, you have to play. If you can play a good game in front of your goalie, you still give yourself a chance to win. That can't be set. Like, the Pens went through that early in the season with Niemi, but they didn't play well in front of him, and he didn't play well at all to begin with. So as long as you can give yourself a fighting chance and your team's playing well in front of you, you should, you'll squeeze out a couple wins. And Vegas was fortunate enough to do that. I mean, they were playing the first couple of weeks of the season with a third string goalie, and they're still second in the Pacific. So they fought through that injury bug very well, and now they're back and fully healthy for the most part. So it's gonna be interesting to see if they can continue that streak that they started with.
Yeah, that injury, or the way that they handled that injury with Fleury was pretty miraculous, actually. Most teams wouldn't have been able to keep up their winning ways like the way that Vegas did, with third and fourth string goalies. But somehow they found a will to win, and they kept it up there. So that's good for them. Pittsburgh's been dealing with something similar, I guess. Not as long of a period of time, but Matt Murray hasn't played in about 2 weeks now, and he's actually on the verge of returning, but Tristan Jarry stepped in, and there's a lot of question marks around that too. Was Jarry going to be suitable enough, to step in and fill that role for them while Murray was out? And then also, kind of a secondary question was, were they going to have to go out and look for another backup goalie in a trade? But I think the way that Jarry played, he could easily be that backup. I don't think there's any real need for a move there. He had a few periods here and there in some games where he didn't look as good as other times, but any goalie could really have that. So but just to get back, I think you already mentioned it there, the Dubinsky injury that happened last night, Tuesday in the game against the Oilers. I really don't understand that at all. It happened with 1 minute and 30 seconds left in the third period. Blue Jackets were down 7-2, and I don't know exactly what sparked it. If it was Dubinsky that asked for the fight, or if it was Kassian that asked for the fight and then the other obliged. But Kassian threw one punch, and you could tell that that's all that it really took, because Dubinsky ducked his head, and turns out he has a fractured orbital bone, and he's going to be out probably 6 to 8 weeks at least. I don't know if there's any surgery required or anything like that, but there's a lot of people that argue if fighting really has a place in the game and things like that. And at that point, I don't see it. Like, there's no need for it. When you're losing that badly, and the game is essentially over. The
game's put away. There, like you said, there was under 2 minutes left. I mean, in my opinion, fighting does have a place in hockey, but that was not the place or time for it. It looked to me from the video that Dubinsky wanted nothing to do with that fight. He was like, Kassian got into his face, and he just kind of like stood there. Kassian already had his gloves off, and then Dubinsky just kind of took them off to, I guess, kind of make him happy or whatever. So like, I don't know if Kassian said, I'm not leaving you go until you drop him, but just from the look of the video, it looked like Dubinsky wanted nothing to do with it, and one swing of the fist, and now he's out for 6 to 8 weeks. Yeah, that's not the time or the place. The fight, all you had to do was skate away. I mean, that fight's not, even if you win, that fight's not solving anything. You're down by 5 goals with 2 minutes left. There's no place for it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, as a Pens fan, maybe that's a little bit of karma, for all those free shots that, Dubinsky took in the playoffs, against Crosby years back. But, you don't really want to see a guy get hurt like that. But, he kind of put himself in that position. I think Kassian got the instigator, for the fight. So, but, I know Dubinsky's a tough guy, but there's very few people, I think, that really, belong dropping the gloves with Zach Kassian, because that's a mean man right there. It would be interesting to see him and Reeves maybe drop them. They're, similar build, similar size and everything like that, both tough as hell. But Dubinsky, I don't think that was his place or anything like that. But, hockey players are too proud, and they're not going to back down from anything pretty much. So,
yeah, I mean, I guess he felt obligated to do it, but you knew he didn't want anything to do with it. And like you said, they're too proud to, just skate away. And I mean, I'm gonna use that to transition into like some of my. I'm just gonna touch on Malkin a little bit because I don't remember which game it was. Malkin, I mean, he seems to take a lot of retaliatory penalties, and he can't just take a hit. If he feels like he was wrongly hit or like caught a cheap shot, he just doesn't let it go. He goes right after the player who caught him, and he doesn't let it go. He goes right after him. Doesn't matter if he's going to take a penalty or not. And it happened pretty clear as day in the game that I want to say it was. I
think it was the Buffalo game that we were at.
Yeah, it was definitely at a game we were at. I just couldn't remember which one.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I know exactly what you're talking about. It was in our zone, or in the offensive zone, well away from the play. I think he and somebody ran into each other like right at the blue line. And then, yeah, like you said, he just didn't let it go. I don't know. It might have been Ristolainen, or I'm not sure. It was one of the defensemen. I know that. And yeah, he, like you said, he just went right after him. And, it was really uncalled for. But I don't know. I guess there's a fine line with that, because obviously you don't want to let the other team take those egregious shots or anything like that. You don't want to just be a pushover, but at the same time, you got to be smart about it, because, that easily, I think at that point, the game was still 0-0. It was early in the game.
Yeah, it was real early in the game. You got to pick your spots, really. And that wasn't it. I mean, yeah, go ahead, take your shot, but, skate it off and get them on the next shift. Like, it's one thing, when that happens, you knew he was taking a penalty. And if I can see it from my seat, damn well the ref saw it too. Like, and he had his eye on Malkin the entire time. And as soon as it happened, his hand went straight up. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, especially with him too, because he kind of has a history of doing that. So obviously he's not a dirty player or anything like that, but they're probably known, and keep an eye out for that sort of thing with certain players. Obviously, I mean, it was in the last game that the Penguins played. That there was a little pushing and shoving in front of the net, and instantly hand goes up, Ryan Reeves goes to the box, and there's really no arguing that it was more so just because of the name that was on the back of his jersey as opposed to what actually happened. But that's part of the game or whatever. I mean, like I said, stand up for yourself, but anytime that you got to usually push guys like Crosby or Malkin pretty far for them to actually drop the gloves. But anytime they do it, I always cringe, just because, one awkward punch or something like that, you break a hand, and then,
you're out for 6 weeks,
Yep. Yeah, it's just not worth it to me. So, fine line.
Yeah. All right. Let's. There's no segue here. We've been talking a lot about winning and losing streaks going throughout the season right now, and obviously, what got our attention on this was the Kings' 8-game winning streak, which was snapped last night. But the 8 games prior to that happening got us talking and looking around the league to see what other kind of streaks were happening. And the Kings' streak is currently the longest in the NHL this season. I honestly don't see anybody else touching it. I mean, 8 games seems at this point seems pretty monumental. The way things have been playing out, I think we've had 1 or maybe 1 to 3 other teams touch 7, but I actually don't even think it's that high. It seems like average is around 4, and then they'll drop a game. But some of the streaks that I've come across, and the biggest one right now, obviously, is Ottawa has dropped 12 of their last 13 games and currently have 5 losses in a row. And oddly enough, this all started with the Matt Duchene trade.
Yeah, obviously, with the player that he is, they shouldn't be losing that badly. I mean, obviously, you can't point the finger at one guy, but it's just kind of strange, that's pretty much what got the ball rolling, on their losing streak. And, even Erik Karlsson, he's right up there. We always talked about it a few times now, how Chris Letang's plus minus is so bad, but Erik Karlsson is right there with him. The roster didn't really change that much, from last year. They made it to the conference final, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I don't really know what the problem is there. Turris is really the only one that's left. As far as I know, they missed Karlsson for a little bit at the beginning of the season. He had had to have that surgery on his foot in the off season. But other than that, I mean, I don't think they really had very many, significant injuries or anything like that. But, certain players just aren't showing up, aren't producing for them. Bobby Ryan only has 2 goals. Matt Duchene, I think, only has like 4 points or something crazy like that on the season. So, or maybe it's only 4 goals, something like that. It's definitely not up to par as far as he goes, though. So, maybe that trade isn't really a good fit. After all, I mean, it's still early. Obviously, he's only played a handful of games with them and everything like that, and teams can easily turn things around. But yes, so far, Nashville is definitely the winner in that trade.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw it a little bit when the trade happened, that people were really upset to see Kyle Turris go. I don't really know why. I mean, he was one of their key players, but I would have thought that, bringing in Matt Duchene would be a lot more excitement like around his name rather than Kyle Turris, but a lot of people were not happy to see Turris go. And I mean, he had 9 points when he left, and now currently Bobby Ryan has 1 goal and 8 assists for 9 points. These big name players that are making, like Bobby Ryan is making $7.25 million, and he only has 9 points on the season. That's a problem. Karlsson, Karlsson's a defenseman, obviously, but he's known to produce on the offensive side, and he has 19 points, but he only has 1 goal. Phaneuf's making $7 million. He only has 11 points, but once again, defensive side. But Duchene, $6 million, 4 points.
I think the majority of hockey people, if you ask them at the beginning of the year, would you rather have Kyle Turris or would you rather have Matt Duchene? I think probably at least 9 out of 10 of them would say Matt Duchene.
Oh, I 100% agree. But at the same time, we don't watch a lot of Ottawa hockey, so they might see something that we don't, and I guess obviously that's showing. But I didn't expect this. I didn't expect Duchene to only have 4 points, and I'm not even sure how many games he's started for.
Oh, it can't be many more than those 13 or whatever, the 12 that they lost. I mean, it's
15 games, I think.
So. Yeah, figured it'd be somewhere around there. I did read some things though, since they have been on this losing streak here. I guess it was either the owner that didn't want to necessarily trade Turris. He was interested in re-signing him, but the GM wasn't for some reason, or vice versa, something like that. There was somebody higher up in the organization that was pretty gung-ho about keeping him there, and then the other guy wasn't so keen on it. So I guess that came into play with the trade and everything like that. But another thing that's kind of stemming from this now is that Erik Karlsson is an unrestricted or restricted free agent, something like that, at the end of this season, I believe. So there's a lot of talk of what happens with him. If come whatever end of January, February or so, if they're still struggling and they're well out of a playoff spot at that point, what do you do with him? Obviously, he's the best player that they have on the team, but do you need to look at rebuilding at that point? Do you need to trade? Because they could get so much back for him, if they decided to go that road. But that's a tough call with a guy like that. That's pretty much the face of the team, for the last few years or whatever. So do you really want to give up a guy like that just because the team is having a bad year, and he's coming up for a new contract, or do you want to stick it out with him and sign him for the long term?
I've seen a couple things, or heard a couple things, that he wants to stay in Ottawa. Once again, not sure if he's just saying that to keep the fans happy, but I mean that's what he's been saying, that he wants to stay in Ottawa. But people can say a lot of things, and then once that checkbook comes out, they can change their minds real quick. So it'll be like you said, it'll be interesting to see if they keep playing at the rate they're playing currently, come January, February, how things are gonna pan out.
Yeah, wherever he goes at the end of the year, whatever ends up happening with him, if he stays or if he goes somewhere else, he's probably going to pull in somewhere around $10 million a year. So either way, he's getting paid. But to kind of keep with the teams that are struggling here, Buffalo's right in that same boat with them, basically. They lost 13 of the last 16, and they're in the bottom of the standings again, which, I don't know, looking at them, it's I guess kind of like a similar situation, that we saw with Edmonton, whatever, maybe 4 or 5 years ago or so, where, they were consistently bad and kept getting, high draft picks, and, they're still rebuilding the team and everything like that. Obviously, Edmonton kind of turned that around last year. They're struggling again a little bit this year, but, Buffalo looks like they might be in another position to, get a top draft pick again here. So, and I believe a big question mark with, as far as their roster goes, is with Evander Kane. He's a free agent at the end of the year too, I believe. So, and I think as of right now, I believe last I checked, at least, he was their top scorer. I just looked. Evander Kane is the Sabres' leading scorer right now. He has 28 points through 31 games. 14 goals and 14 assists. He's a -6. Eichel's right behind him with 24.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because they're definitely in their rebuilding phase with with Eichel, and so it'll be interesting to see if they decide to keep Kane or keep rebuilding. I kind of guess restart their rebuilding, because they have a lot of problems in Buffalo right now.
Yeah, I don't think it's just one issue. I've always thought that their goaltending was kind of weak, and I don't think that they're terribly strong on the back end either, on the blue line. But
no, that goes back to what I said before. Obviously just my opinion, but if you can build a decent team in front of your goaltender, you should still be able to give yourself a chance to win. So I do think they need to start with some of the blue line defense and get another scorer in there, at least one.
But do you see Robin Lehner as the number one goalie?
No, I don't. But where do you begin? Do you trade Kane and try and get a top tier goalie? Is Kane worth a top tier goalie? Where do you begin? I personally don't think that is their main issue. Like I said earlier, we saw Vegas get by with a third string goalie. Not saying that Leonard's third string, but he's definitely not a top tier goalie. But if you can put a somewhat decent product in front of you, you shouldn't be losing 13 of 16 games. I mean, you should at least be playing some 500 hockey at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a combination of the two. I mean, probably at least two of their three defensemen, aren't really that solid. And, if you combine that with an average goalie, that's, I guess, kind of a recipe for disaster. So, I don't know. That's where I would look first, maybe. If they do get another high draft pick, I mean, obviously, even if they drafted a goalie, most goalies don't come into the league, right away after being drafted. So, their only way to improve there, like you said, might be to make a trade. But really good goalies are hard to come by, in the league. So that's tough on the Jason Barrell, the GM up there now. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I mean, I don't really see them getting any better. I don't see them clawing their way back into anything, this year. So.
All right. Let's talk about our weekly segment on hat tricks. It's been about 2 weeks since we last recorded, and the hat trick production has slowed down tremendously from what we were used to. From 2 weeks ago, we've only had 3 hat tricks, and let's see, where was it? Oh, I lost it. But 3 hat tricks in 2 weeks, and up until December 12th, in 2016, we were at 19 hat tricks, and right now we're in 2017, we're at 30. So at one point in the season, we were pretty much at double what the production was from last season. So it's starting to even out. I'm curious to see how the rest of the season's going to go, especially with a lot of these injuries from the bigger players. So be curious to see. I kind of think at this point now that it's kind of going to even out. I still think we're going to end up with more than last season, but I don't think we're going to get quite to double like we thought earlier in the year. I'd say we'd probably end up around maybe 15 to 20% higher than what we were last year.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see more, but just over these last 2 weeks, we were used to seeing about 3 a week, and then since the last time we recorded, like right at the end of November there, we've only seen 3 since then. One from Grabner, one from Paul Byron, and one from Braden Schenn. And that the last one was Schen's on the 5th of this month. So, more than 8 days since we've seen any new hat tricks there. So, definitely has come down.
All right, so let's get into the weekly Pens talk. And once again, I don't want to say we don't have anything good to talk about or build on, but it's been pretty abysmal as of late.
Yeah, they had that 4-game win streak there, which was their longest of the season, but they just finished up a 5-game homestand, and they only came out with 3 points, 4 points, something like that, or 3 wins, I believe it was. During that stand. So, and they played teams like Colorado, Buffalo. They beat Buffalo, but they got shut out by Colorado. Colorado played their backup goalie that night. So
They actually didn't get shut out by Colorado.
That's right. They did. Phil Kessel did score late in that game. I forgot about that. But it might as well have been a shutout.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, they got shut out.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, it's as of right now, they're out of a wild card spot. The Metro is really tight, though. I mean, there's only 4 or 5 points separating the Penguins from those top teams right now. But certain teams have been streaking, playing some pretty good hockey, compared to the way that they were even maybe playing like 2 or 3 weeks ago. The Capitals seem to kind of be rolling right now, and the Rangers, yep. The Islanders have been playing well. The Devils, like we talked about and kind of predicted, they've kind of came back to earth there for a minute, but they did just, like we said earlier, beat the Kings, pretty handedly last night to end their 8-game win streak. But I mean, they're not out of it by any means. But there's still a lot of areas that need improvement.
They're a 500 team right now, and at that rate, that's not gonna get them into playoffs. I know it's a tight race, but 500 hockey is not playoff hockey. Not in this day and age. There's too many good teams that if you play 500 hockey, you're not gonna make it. And I don't know. There's a lot of question marks. I personally would like to see solid lines. They're changing lines up in my opinion, way too often. The only things that are guaranteed are Crosby's playing center on the first line, and Gino and Phil are on the second line. Those are the only guaranteed things, barring injury, which, knock on wood, I hope we don't have to deal with those 3 players. But I would like to see something more solidified when it comes to the lines, because I feel like they're not being given ample time to build any chemistry. We're almost to Christmas. The big thing was at American Thanksgiving, if you were in a playoff spot at that point, then you're 3 out of 4 times going to make it. I mean, we've dropped out of the playoff spot since then. And granted, yeah, the Metro is tight, but I'm in panic mode. I'm not even gonna, fret from it. I'm to the point where something needs to be done. And honestly, I don't know what they can do. Can they move Cole right now? I don't know. I mean, they're having a lot of injuries on the defensive side. We just lost Schultz for a few games. I don't know. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in that panic mode yet, but I heard Jim Rutherford on the radio earlier, and he said they're starting to approach the midway point of the season, and that's kind of the time where he likes to really evaluate things. And it doesn't seem like he's opposed to making a move if the right move presented itself. As far as they still need a third line center, and I think that they could get stronger on the blue line as well. What that would mean, as far as what they'd have to give up, I don't know. But he's always, look and see, what options he has out there. And I think part of it too is it's not that he's not looking, still and not interested in making a trade, but it's either, I think some of the guys maybe that they've had their eye on aren't available yet. Which may have to wait until closer to the trade deadline. Once we see, what teams are going to be definitively out of the playoffs. And then I think another part of it too is maybe some of those guys that they've had their eye on. The asking price is just too high right now. But I going back to as far as the existing players and the lines that they play with, I have no problem with changing the lines, to try and shake things up and get things going and everything like that. But it seems like they're doing that way, way too much as of late. Even from the previous day's practice to, halfway through the next day's game or something like that. They might practice with Gensel, Crosby, and Sherry on the first line. And then in the second period, all of a sudden, there's Hornquist that's up on that first line now, and Sherry gets dropped down to the third line. So I don't know. I mean, there's several different things that I look at, and I posed a question and a poll, on our Twitter last night, asking the people that follow us and the people that listen and things like that, what they think the Penguins' biggest problem is. And there's still a few hours left on the poll, but the last I checked, it was about 60% of people thought that it was 5-on-5 scoring. And I agree. I mean, fourth line is almost non-existent, if the team is trailing, or even if the game is tied, like past the midway point or so of the game, they don't really see much ice time. So, I mean, most teams' fourth line, they're not put out there to score or anything like that. But this team's fourth line is kind of a liability, I think, at the same time too, where, even if you have the lead, it's kind of risky, putting them out there because they're not that great in their own zone. But, that's kind of the way that the team has been playing as a whole too. I have no problem with the way that Riley Sheahan's been playing. I don't think he's a long-term answer, and I've said this all along. He's not the long-term answer for the third-line center, but he's been playing okay. He's had a couple goals, over the last 3 games or so, and a couple points otherwise. But there's certain guys that just that aren't going. Connor Sherry is one of them that really stands out to me. I saw a stat the other day that said that he only has 5 assists or something like that in his last 39 regular season games played. And, that's, even if it was just 5 assists, the games that they've played so far this year, that's still unacceptable. And they've been having him play on the top line too. So, I don't know. There's definitely not enough 5-on-5 scoring. And, that also still falls back on Crosby, on Malkin. Phil Kessel's probably playing some of the best hockey of his career, but it's still not necessarily, doesn't translate to good 5-on-5 hockey. It's kind of hard. I mean, there's no... I don't think there's really one area or one specific player really that you can point the finger at, and really put the blame on. There's multiple areas.
Don't you tempt me.
I know you're going to say Chris Letang, but it's not just him though.
I know. I could make a case for it though, but no. I mean, you and I butt heads on this all the time. My solution. And obviously, I'm no hockey coach, but I honestly think if you're gonna keep flip flopping lines around, do something that's outside the box. They experiment. They had to experiment with Gensel at center for a few games there. Why not? You can move him to third line center. You can level out that scoring because. Sheahan's filling in well in the faceoff circle, but I mean, as far as goal scoring production goes, I mean, the bottom 2 lines, there's nothing coming from it. So I don't see why you couldn't move Gensel to the third line center, and then you can reevaluate Sheahan on the fourth line with. have them platoon for the fourth line center. That's kind of what I feel like is missing from the Pens a little bit, is that little bit of like inner team competition, battling for spots. Everyone just seems so complacent with everything, and I think that's actually playing into the way that they're playing, at least for some of the guys. I mean, Crosby's out there every night and he's hustling every play. I never see him take a shift off. He's playing hard every shift, regardless of the score. So I'm happy with him. And as a Pens fan, it's hard not to be happy with Crosby. But I've said it for a long time. I think Malkin's lazy. Like on the back check, in the neutral zone. Obviously he's a player whenever it comes to the offense, but sometimes I feel like he tries to do too much with the puck. But like some of this, they bring Simone up, what's that solving? Why not just bring up Sprong? If you're, we were opposed to it a little bit a few weeks ago, but at this point, why are you bringing Simone up and not Sprong? Sprong's supposed to be your future player, and like everybody's saying he's the answer. So, why isn't he in the lineup? Why isn't he seeing any time on the big team? I just don't understand some of the things that are happening right now. Like you said, they're changing lines constantly during the game, or they'll have a set line prior to the game and then it changes halfway through the second period. Especially if those lines aren't producing at all. I don't know. I mean, at this point, I feel like you almost need an entire shakeup. You've mentioned that Crosby might be particular of the people he plays with. But, I think at some point something has to give as far as your ego. And I'm not saying that Crosby has an ego, but at some point, like it's so bizarre to me that he doesn't play on a line with Kessel at all, except for on the power play. It just blows my mind. Go ahead.
I think that's just more so a chemistry thing between Gino and Phil. They obviously play well together, and there's never really been any reason to split those two up, I think, as far as like their production and stuff like that. So, if that's going to be your most consistent, at least center and winger, then I think that's kind of why they keep it together. As far as like the Simone being called up as opposed to Sprong, I think that speaks to how much he is actually, like, how far away he actually is from being ready to play in the NHL, which it kind of sucks because because of the league's rules or whatever, he had to go back to the QM JHL or whatever, to play down there. And he wasn't able to stay, even in the AHL, when he played that handful of games, with the team or whatever. But from everything that I hear, DK from DK on Pittsburgh Sports was on the radio yesterday, and he was actually talking about that. They, specifically have somebody that covers Wilkes-Barre, and Sprong is apparently just absolutely not ready, not even close to being ready, which I think, to kind of tie that into some of the other stuff that you were saying too, with there not being, any sort of like competition as far as some of these guys as to, the spots that they have. Sprong, if he was able to come up and he was actually ready, it would be a similar situation to, what happened with Gensel, last year. He came up and he was on fire, pretty much right away. And I think that kind of sparked some of the other guys too. But, they can't do that with Sprong. And apparently Zach Aston Reese in some ways, I guess he's better in certain areas than, where Sprong is, but I've heard that he's not very fast. I think he plays more of a 200-foot game than Sprong does. Obviously, he's not as as a predominant scorer as what Sprong is, but each guy, I guess, kind of brings some different things to the table, but each guy equally struggles in certain areas to the point where, they're just not ready for them to come up here yet. So in the 2 games that he's played, I haven't had any problems with the way that Simone has played. He made a really nice move in the game the other night, like right inside the blue line. Kind of deked it to his forehand, put it through the defender's legs, and then made a nice pass to Crosby, who got a decent shot off. And, it was definitely a scoring chance. It didn't end up in a goal, but I think if he's going to stay, we'll see what he can do tomorrow night, I guess, up on that top line with Sid. But the lines of practice today are what really kind of boggle my mind. I mean, they moved Hornquist to the left side on Gino's line, which I don't really understand because he's a right winger. He's not a left wing. And then Hagelin didn't even take line rushes. So I don't know if he's going to be, if that is indicative that he's going to be a scratch tomorrow. But the fourth line then could very well be Archibald, Rowney, and Kuhnhackl, maybe with Ryan Reeves getting a scratch. I don't know if they're willing to do that since they made that trade for Reeves, but if they're practicing with Archibald, then somebody has to come out, either Kuhnhackl or Reeves, and I think Kuhnhackl is more valuable in the lineup than what Ryan Reeves is. Against certain teams, maybe Reeves would be, but I don't know. Vegas, I don't really see, they're not really a chippy team or anything like that. They have Derek Engelland, but whatever.
Yeah, that'd be the only one I'd be worried about on that team. But
yeah. But, Kuhnhackl is a great penalty killer, so I don't know. Do you really want to risk it? Leaving him out and leaving Reeves in. I mean, obviously Archibald can kill penalties too. He's done it for them in the past, but the good thing is, I guess, is that they have options, but, I would like to see some consistency, as far as that goes. And the thing with me, as far as Guentzel playing center, you already have, Rowney and Sheahan that can play, that third and then fourth line center. So if you take Guentzel, off the wing, whether it's with Crosby or with Malkin, and put him at center, then, you're taking a wing away to put him at a position where they already have guys that can play that position, I guess. So that's, and I don't really like Guentzel's size all that much as far as, what a center goes. I mean, Sheahan is a little bit bigger than he is, but he doesn't really play physical at all.
Yeah,
either, so.
I mean, his size is more the reason why I feel like he would be a good fit on third line. On a third line center. He's not a top 2 center by any means. I'm outside of his scoring. Like, he can score, don't get me wrong. Like, he's a great scorer, but we talked about this last year a little bit, and you mentioned that you think Guentzel relies on Crosby a little too much. And when you said that, I watched more and more, and I saw it happen more and more that he did rely on Crosby too much as far as making passes and receiving passes from him. So I would like to see him not try, but I would like to see him step up and, improve his overall game as an individual, like on an individual level. But so, and you mentioned Sherry, I think, during the week, and how he's not producing and everything. And I think that's a direct result of, I think he overachieved really when he played with Crosby. I don't think he puts up the numbers he does on any other team. And as far as if you move Gensel to the third line center, then you open up a top line spot for Hagelin, who you're currently paying $2 million a year, and according to today's line rushes, isn't even gonna play in the next game. His offensive production has been low, but like I said, is sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures, and you don't think it right now, but like I said earlier, I'm in panic mode. I think something needs to be done. And if you're not going to shake up the lines like drastically, they need to have more consistency, and you can't. There's really no happy medium. Like, you have to have solidified lines. Obviously, I don't watch a whole lot of other hockey outside of the Pens, but I also don't hear too many other teams changing up their lines as often as the Pens are doing.
I try to pay attention to as much as I can, but with there being how many teams there are, it's hard to,
I try and pay attention to
everything, but the one team that I do know that maybe not even as often, but the Dallas Stars, they've seemed to kind of have that same problem where they just weren't scoring goals, and I've seen them shake up their lines a pretty good bit, not necessarily like mid-game or anything like that, but they definitely have made a lot of changes to the personnel that they have on each line from what I've seen. But really at this point, I just want to see, I'd like to see, at least if you're going to change the lines up, let's just say that they play with these lines that they practice with today. If they keep those lines tomorrow, whether they win or lose, I'd like to see them at least stick with that, for maybe at least one more game, or even two more games.
Yes, I completely agree. I don't think they've kept the same lines for more than a game this entire season. Even when they were winning, they were still changing shit up. I know some of it has to do with injuries, but most of the injuries that we've had have been on the defensive end. Hornquist went down the other night with that when he took the puck to the head, but he came back the next game, so there was no need to change the lineup there. I just don't understand it. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough, and I can only imagine what it's like to be Jim Rutherford, because obviously you're looking for that spark. You're looking for. And even Sullivan, too, you're looking for any and all options, of what you could possibly do, which I think, a big problem when Dan Bilesma was here was that he wouldn't change the lines, I think, enough when the team was, on a skid. But, right now it seems like Sullivan is kind of doing the opposite of that, which, it's tough. I don't really know what they can do. Obviously, we said that there's several areas that they need to improve, but, I don't know if they need to maybe shake up the D pairings more than what they already have.
I was going to mention that next. With as much as they're shaking up the scoring lines, they haven't really touched the defensive pairings at all. And, with that being said, I mentioned to you earlier in the week, or it might have been last week. We touched earlier in the year how Letang and Crosby were both tied at plus minus near the bottom of the league, and Crosby has climbed 8 points, closer back to 0, and Letang still remains in the bottom 10 of the league. And at some point something has to give. I'm not saying, we can't do anything with him other than move, change his time on ice, limit it, or, move him to the second line pairing. But, when you're paying him a shitload of money, and I understand, you want him on the ice, but at some point you got to realize how big of a liability he is defensively, at least this season. He's on pace for a career high in giveaways this year. I believe, I can't remember what it was, what I told you the other day, but he's already 2/3 of the way to his career high, and we're not even at the halfway point in the season. So, something has to change.
Yeah, that's a tough call too. I mean, I don't know if that's really necessarily if punishing him, I guess you could say, for lack of a better word, would really help him necessarily. But I mean, the more he's on the ice, the more likely he is to make a mistake and everything like that. I mean, obviously, we know and we've seen from him that he can be, one of the top 5 defensemen in the league, or whatever, wherever you want to rank him. He's been a Norris finalist, a couple different times and everything like that. So he definitely has the talent, but even just watching him, there's nothing to me that really sticks out to where oh, this is what he needs to fix. This is what he needs to change. I don't know. It's really hard to pinpoint. And I'm sure that, they've probably watched tape countless times, and, he's probably looked at his game. He's probably had multiple conversations, with guys like Sergei Gonchar and stuff like that to try and figure out, what he can do to kind of turn his game around. But so far, I haven't really noticed him trying anything different necessarily. There was that.
Maybe that's the problem, though.
There was that short stretch of games where it did kind of look like he was starting to play better, and then he kind of took another step backwards though too. So, I mean,
that to me that could be the problem. Like you said, you haven't noticed him doing anything differently, outside of how he normally plays. For me, his improvement needs to come on the decision making. I think he needs to make some better passes, and maybe, I don't know, he takes a shit ton of shots, and a shit ton of those shots don't get through. They get blocked, or they're not even getting to the net. I looked the other day, 53% of his shots only get to the net. He's second on the team in shots, only 10 behind Kessel. I know he got paid for his ability to score and, create scoring opportunities, but it's not happening this year. I mean, his assist number says otherwise, but I think the assist statistic is such a construed statistic because of the secondary assist, and you don't necessarily have to make a pass, like a actual pass, to get assists on plays. So I mean, the secondary assist is a very construed number to me, and some people argue the same with plus minus, but I'm a pretty big believer in the plus minus. But I think he's 4th on the team in points, and only one of those are a goal. All the rest came from assists, and I'm curious. I think he had 10 primary assists, and the other 11 were secondary. So whether or not those came from actual passes that he made, or they came off a shot that got deflected at the point and went into the corner, and someone passed to someone else and then scored, it's such a construed stat to me. So he might have a lot of points, but I just don't believe it. It's not a selling point for me, at least for him. but I would like to see something change as far as his decision making. And moving him to the second line doesn't necessarily punish him. I think it might light a fire under his ass. But I don't necessarily see it as punishing him. I think it gives more opportunity to the other defensemen, because he's playing 25 minutes a game and he's like a -16. I don't know. The entire Penguins team, I think Phil Kessel is the only one in positive numbers as far as plus minus goes. That has been there the entire season anyway.
Yeah, I think Sheahan is a plus too, but everybody else is a minus to some extent.
Yeah, so
I don't focus as much as that on that stat as you do either, though, I think. But another thing with Chris Letang, though, too, is I think a big part of it is if he can start to build and get some of his confidence back, then I think those decisions and turning the puck over and things like that, will also start to come around. But, it's just, I guess, is taking longer, than I think anybody really expected, for that to really turn around. So I really don't. I mean, putting him on, the second pair, I'm okay with that. I would never go as far as, I don't think, putting him on the third pair.
Oh no, I'm not even like exploring that option. I never wanted him to go more deeper than the second line. I think just, if you want to flip flop the first and second pairings, that's fine. Or just give the second line a little bit more time. There's no reason Letang has to play 25 minutes.
Yeah, big thing for me too, as far as the defense goes, is I've noticed that, and I think we might have talked about this before too, but it doesn't seem like they're moving the puck up and out of the zone as fast as they have, last year or the year before that. They talk a speed game, but the breakout is a big part of that. And one thing that I've kind of noticed with the team is that, and I don't know if maybe this is more of like giving credit to the teams that they're playing, in defending the Penguins, or if it's just, something that the Penguins are doing, for whatever reason. But I haven't really seen them, it's not like they get the puck and then, the next thing it's out of the zone. They're halfway through the neutral zone and, they're on their way to, getting into the O-zone and trying to set something up there, or, getting an opportunity or something like that. There's been multiple times where I've seen them pass D to D at least once, if not twice, before they can, make a decision to make a pass, which I don't know if you really recall, but I don't recall them doing that much, in at least the last 2 years, during the cup runs and stuff like that. It was, like I said, maybe, one quick pass, maybe a little, 6-foot pass or something like that from one of the forwards. And then the other two are already up the ice, puck is moving, and everybody's, on their way to the offensive zone. Not this, pass it back and forth, wait for somebody to get open, sort of, I don't know, dilly-dallying around.
Dilly-dilly.
In the defensive zone, like I've noticed, which I don't know, like I said, does that reflect on the teams that they're playing? Is that just a matter of, maybe some of these guys that they have, on? I mean, really, Hunwick is the only new guy, per se, that they have back there. But I don't know. They're just not. I just don't see that clean, crisp, one breakout pass, and then they're on their way.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about Letang getting his confidence back, and that might help with some of the decision making. But it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I think he would get his confidence back if he started making some better decisions and started making some better shot selections and passes. it was mentioned on I think Spit and Chicklets podcast the other day how the debate was, is Crosby better than Wayne Gretzky? And the funny thing about the debate is it can be argued because Gretzky, like they mentioned, played in an era where he was, the top guy. He was the most athletic guy. You're not, like they said, you're not playing against guys that, just went out on a bender the night before, and goalies that are doing that too. Like the league has come such a long way compared to when Gretzky and Lemieux played. So I do think some of that has to do with Letang's struggles, and the same could be said with Karlsson too. Like, they were always such a hot commodity because they were fast defensemen and they were like extremely athletic. But now the rest of the league is too, and they don't have, like, to me, I don't think that those type of defensemen have that edge over the offense anymore, like in the offensive zone anyway. So I don't know. I think that's a big argument for me. Like, the goaltending has gotten so much better. And like you said, you mentioned that, Letang hasn't really changed up his game that much, and that could very well be the problem, that he hasn't adapted to this new standard in the league where, he's not one of those
new, though, either. I mean, he's played long enough, and it's not like things have drastically changed, since he came into the league, or over the last 2 years or whatever, that guys are all of a sudden more athletic than he is. Because
I mean, you got to understand, he sat out last season. I mean, he sat out from February? Was it February?
Yeah, but he's still in. I think he's back to 100% now, though. I mean, he physically, as far as that goes, like he's in good enough shape that I don't think it has anything. That's a good way to, I guess, put it. Is I think his problems are more so mental than anything physical. Especially, I think maybe part of his decision making too is that there's been a couple times where I felt like he's made too quick of a decision because he felt like a hit was coming or something like that. I don't know if it's, maybe he doesn't, want to get injured again or something like that. But that's one thing I've noticed. But as far as like physicality and stuff like that goes, I think he's in just as good a shape as, the best guy, on the other team.
But that's exactly my point, is that he doesn't have that advantage like he once had, where he was one of the most athletic players on the ice, like not just on the Penguins, but on the ice entirely. Like, he had that advantage before, where I feel like, he didn't play a lot of last season, but he's 30 years old. I mean, he's not a young buck anymore. I'm not saying he's necessarily lost anything, but the league's getting younger and he's getting older. So, I mean, that's my argument with it. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's still an athletic person. Like, he's still an athletic player, but he might not be at that same level he was, say, 4 years ago, or I don't know. I just, because I'm not saying just for Letang. Like, I mentioned Karlsson as well. Like, his, he's known as, putting up more than one goal, and that's all he has too. He has similar point totals to Letang as far as goals to assists. So I don't know. I feel like their advantage just isn't there like it was like 4 years ago.
I mean, I don't know. I don't really see him as losing a step. I really think that he's more in his head than anything, which could also be the same problem with, Karlsson. I don't watch them enough, but to really say that about him. But I think that's Letang's biggest hurdle that he needs to get over.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying that for a while too. Like this, this new take, I guess, this new hot take just kind of came to me, like as we were sitting here discussing everything, and but the podcast from Spit and Chicklets kind of really put that that little bug in my ear that the league is getting faster, stronger, and more athletic, and I think it actually stemmed from like the NHL 100 voting and everything. That's you're never gonna see 5 goals from the same player in a game again, just because the goaltending has come such a long way and is so much better than it was 20 years ago. So like, I don't know, that's just where it all came from, is that you're not. Back then, your D-men were your biggest, slowest guys on the ice, it seemed like, and they weren't involved in the offense as much as your D-men are in today's game, where they had like your Zdeno Charas, who have like over 100 mile per hour heavy slap shots that guys don't want to get in front of and block, whereas you have just to throw out Chris Letang, like you never see him take a huge clapper from the point. It's always these like wind up to maybe his knee with this little like half slap shot that nobody's afraid to get in front of, and part of the reason why a lot of his shots aren't getting to the net.
I don't really ever recall him having much of a slap shot, though. I mean, it's definitely, he has one, but I think that's, his wrist shot or his half slapper, like you said, is more of his kind of go-to.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at, is like maybe he needs to start changing that up, because especially like the equipment changes too. Equipment's so good now that you can take pucks to the knees and to the shins, and you're at Letang's speed on his shot, people aren't going to be afraid to get in front of him and take a puck off the knee or off the shin. It's not going to hurt him. People aren't going to be afraid to get in front of it. Whereas
that's one thing too, is
go ahead.
Guys aren't going to be afraid to get in front of them, but if he's only taking those wrist shots, then he needs to get his shots through. Because there's been, I know countless times when we're watching him and he takes one of those shots from the point and he shoots it right into the guy's shins in front of him.
Oh, absolutely. That goes off. He has to make better shot selections, or if he's gonna take these shots from the point, make them like miss on purpose. Put it in the corner. Get a goofy rebound off the corner board or something, or create offense in different ways other than shooting right at the net, because there's not a lot of guys on the Pens that are going to be parked in front of the net. You have Hornquist, who is your main guy. Crosby will get in the mix from time to time, but his plays sort of off the side of the net.
Gensel likes to go there too a little bit.
Yeah, but like you said, Gensel doesn't have the size. Like he can't muscle his way through the center of the ice in front of the goalie, as where Hornquist can. So to me, like, if I'm gonna change one thing about his actual play on Letang, is if you're gonna take those shots from the point, give him like aerial shots, or like, I forget what they call them, but miss on purpose, like a premeditated miss, if you will. I think they call them area passes in a way, but these are shots. So don't shoot at the net. See if you can get a crazy deflection from another angle. Where at this point they got to try something. He has to try something.
Yeah, it could just be a matter of maybe doing the simple thing too, but. We tend to talk about Letang a lot, which, I don't know if I don't want people that are listening to think that, we're picking on him or trying to single him out or anything like that. Because, I I'm a fan. I've liked Letang. I thought, that he's always been exciting to watch. Obviously, he's having a tough year this year, but I want nothing more than to see him play well. Because if he plays well, then that's only going to resonate throughout the team, I think. And, that could easily help them turn around some of this other stuff, that they're kind of struggling with now. So, maybe we focus on him a little bit too much.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
he also he stands out at the same time, too, though. So,
yeah. Don't get me wrong. Like you said, I want to see him succeed, because if he's succeeding, that means the Pens are winning. The Pens are succeeding. I think what really gets to me is that, he's eating up a lot of the Pens salary, and, he's being paid for, how do I want to word this? I mean, he's not doing what he was paid for, or what he's being paid for. And, I'll admit I am probably his biggest critic. Just because I'm a critic of him doesn't mean I don't like him. Like you said, I want him to succeed, and I think the reason we spend so much time on him is because you and I have such different opinions on his style of play, and that's where the parody comes in, and it creates good debate and good quote unquote ratings and whatever. So but that's probably our most heated, and it's not even really heated, but it's our most debatable topic as far as the rest of the show goes.
Yeah, and then I think just to round out the episode and the Pens talk here, they're on the road for 3 games right now: Vegas, Arizona, Colorado. Vegas is going to be a good game. Looks like Murray will be back, and Fleury, just played his first game back for Vegas, against Carolina. So looks like we're going to see the first Fleury-Murray matchup. So, I'm sure it's going to be an emotional game for a lot of those guys, since they played with Fleury for so long here in Pittsburgh. And, even for Murray, too, because, he wasn't here very long, while Fleury was here. But I still think that, they had a special bond and things like that, while they played together. So, it should be an interesting game. And, maybe that's, the littlest things in hockey can give a team a spark. So, maybe that will happen tomorrow. I mean, they should beat Arizona. They should beat Colorado, even though they just lost to them at home. But, then they come back home for 3 games, leading up to Christmas, and then right after Christmas, and they play Columbus, Anaheim, and then Columbus again. So, I'd like to see them string some wins together here, and one step at a time, I guess, is all that they can really do. Because there is so many different things I think that they need to work on. But once they get one thing clicking, then I think the other things will also kind of fall into place too. So see how it goes. That's a wrap for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at BarDahnPodcast. Love to hear some feedback from you. If anybody has any topic suggestions or anything like that, hit us up and let us know. Bye-bye.